I want to talk for a moment about this Acorn situation because I think that it's a very important development in the struggle in this country right now. And I want to just step back and give you a couple of facts about this. Acorn is a community organization that has 500,000 member families. I've seen Acorn in New Orleans. I've seen them in poor communities across the country. Acorn is a complicated organization. It is a flawed organization. It certainly has had very serious problems, including one of the founders ripping off money from the group. Bertha Lewis, who is now the head of Acorn, was brought in to try to clean up some of those problems. And I think she's generally doing a good job and has been trying very hard to clean up the problems at Acorn. Acorn, however, for as large of an organization as it is, does a pretty good job of steering away from corruption. There have been its moments, and they've been dealing with it. So I by no means am going to stand up and say Acorn is this wonderful organization that has never had any problems, never done anything wrong, and has never had corruption issues. But Acorn received $53 million over the course of 15 years from the federal government. $53 million. Most of that money went to support low-income or moderate-income housing initiatives across the country under the Acorn Housing Corporation. $53 million, 500,000-person organization. A right-wing activist trying to be a dime store Michael Moore poses as a pimp and brings in a woman who he describes as a prostitute. And they tried repeatedly to get someone from Acorn's tax assistance initiative to give her tax advice as a prostitute. And they were tossed out of, I think, 15, it could be 12, it was 15 Acorn offices because people said, this is a scam, you aren't real, and we don't do that. That's not what we do. We give legitimate tax advice to people with legitimate tax concerns. Finally, these frauds find two Acorn staffers that were not tax specialists to give some tax advice to this woman. It wasn't even advice, to sort of talk to this woman about her taxes that they thought was a sex worker. I think that those people were wrong in doing what they did, and so did Acorn, and they fired those individuals. This all of a sudden, though, became a huge firestorm. That Acorn is an organization that is giving tax advice to prostitutes, telling them how to avoid paying income tax and to claim deductions that were inappropriate. And next thing you know, it goes through the sort of right-wing machine, and Glenn Beck is talking about it, and Rush Limbaugh is talking about it. And all of a sudden now, Acorn is basically just a huge corrupt mafia organization and Obama used to work for them. And all these lies and other things are being told. So John Boehner, the minority leader in the House, the guy who looks like a pumpkin, puts forward this Defund Acorn Act. And the Defund Acorn Act singles out Acorn and seeks to strip it of all federal funding based on this sting video with the fake pimp and fake prostitute. All but 75 Democrats in the House voted to defund Acorn. All but 75. In the Senate, there were 2 votes on it. In one, you had 7 Democrats vote against the Republican initiative, and in another, you had 11 vote against it. Now, it's fine. The Democrats have every right to cast a vote in favor of legislation that quite likely is unconstitutional. But people do stupid stuff all the time on the Hill. But here's the bigger point. Of those hundreds of Democrats that voted to defund Acorn, how many of them have ever done anything worth talking about to target corporate criminals? How many of them have ever sought to defund Lockheed Martin, or defund Boeing, or defund Northrop Grumman? These corporations, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin, are the 3 biggest contractors that do business with the federal government. They do $77 billion in annual contracts with the federal government. The top 100 government contractors in this country do $300 billion a year in business with the federal government. And they've committed, in the same period that Acorn got its $53 million, these 100 corporations have committed 676 acts of documented misconduct for which they have paid tens of millions of dollars in fines. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman collectively committed 105 acts of misconduct as identified by the Project on Government Oversight. These are real corporate criminals with real life rap sheets. and yet nothing ever happens to them. No one ever goes after them and tries to have them defunded. These are recidivist criminals that have a long history of ripping off U.S. taxpayers and engaging in criminal conduct in some cases. Pfizer, the huge drug company, the maker of the official drug of the Senate, Viagra, just settled in September the largest fraud case in the history of the United States. Civil and criminal charges, including Medicaid fraud, ripping off the Medicaid program, marketing drugs that had been banned by the Food and Drug Administration, mismarketing those drugs. They paid $3 billion in fines and have a felony conviction. One of the prosecutors involved with that case from Massachusetts said that while the settlement was being brokered with Pfizer, Pfizer's misconduct was continuing. This is a company that is $40 billion a year in profits, does $70 million a year in business with the federal government. They just were convicted in both civil and criminal cases of massive fraud, and they continue to do business. Representative Betty McCollum of Minnesota put forward an initiative to try to prohibit the government from doing business with companies that engage in this kind of fraud for a period of, I think it's 5 years. It's not going to go anywhere. It's certainly not going to pass. But that's about it. You have Betty McCollum and Representative David Obey of Wisconsin, and I think 8 or 9 other congresspeople that have actually tried to take any action on, against Pfizer. So when you have Acorn on the one hand, that is registering hundreds of thousands of people to vote, given most of them are black and Latino or they're poor, so they don't vote the right way when it comes to the Republican perspective. You have an organization that doesn't have high-powered lobbyists, that doesn't give campaign contributions, and they get caught doing something stupid. The price for them is probably non-existence. They are probably going to be wiped out at some point if they're not defended. When you're a corporate criminal, though, and you spend tens of millions of dollars lobbying, and you're working the Hill, and you're pouring cash into the campaign coffers of Democrats and Republicans alike. The war industry now gives more money to the Democrats than they do to the Republicans because they see which way the wind is blowing. Who's going to win if you put those two kinds of forces up against each other on Capitol Hill? Of course the war industry is going to win.